Excuse me, are you Adam Graham?
The very same. And this is my old-time radio snack wagon.
Welcome to the Old-Time Radio Snack Wagon, where we serve up a bite-sized portion of old-time radio. And now, here's your Snack Wagon host, Adam Graham.
Today, we're serving up a follow-up to something I did on one of my other podcasts, The Amazing World of Radio. For the summer series a few years back, my Patreon supporters chose the Men of 1,000 Voices series. And this was all about one-man theater. Of course, audio lends itself to storytelling. And there were great storytellers over radio, whether it was someone like John Nesbitt or professional actors who were reading a story for a specific program. But the Men of 1,000 Voices were different. They could narrate the story, and they could play all the characters, giving you the feel like you were listening to a full cast performance. The first of these we focused on was Frank Graham, whose 5-day-a-week series Nightcap Yarns in the late 30s really got the genre started. And then in the post-war era, Paul Frees, who was famous for so many animated voices, revived the concept for his series Studio X, which was alternately called The Player. And so the series focused really on just those two men. Recently, I learned of at least one more series that had this concept: Armchair Adventures. The series was Armchair Adventures, and it starred Marvin Miller. Miller is best remembered as the voice of Robbie the Robot in Forbidden Planet. But he also would land the role of Michael Anthony on The Millionaire. He would voice Aquaman, and he was also the narrator of the FBI on television, and he won 2 Grammy Awards for his readings of Dr. Seuss. In 1952, he recorded a transcribed series of Armchair Adventures. The series aired over CBS, and it made sense, I think, particularly for the era, given that the budget for radio programs was being reduced. So budget-wise, you couldn't really beat Marvin Miller as the entire talent of a dramatic production. Well, let's see how it worked out in today's episode, Jack the Giant Killer.
Time now for Armchair Adventures. I've been expecting you, and you're right on time. I have a story for you, the story of a man who had to fight. Grizzled old Dad Hartman, owner of the Circle A Ranch, studied the bruises on Jack Bennett's face.
Well, Jack, my foreman looks a lot worse than you do. But maybe the fight was his fault.
Jack bristled.
He had it coming to him, Mr. Hartman. Nobody calls me a runt.
Dad heaved a regretful sigh.
Well, Jack, you're a good cowhand, and I hate to let you go. But the boys was right when they nicknamed you Jack the Giant Killer.
Yes, it's time for Armchair Adventures. Tales of crime, mystery, romance, and comedy. Now, here is your storyteller, Marvin Miller, with tonight's Armchair Adventure, Jack the Giant Killer.
Jack Bennett's face showed no regret at the news that he was fired. If anything, his bristling air of antagonism seemed to lessen, and the bunched muscles under the skin of his jaw to relax. There was regret in Dad Hartman's voice.
You see, that chip you carry on your shoulder is becoming pretty well known in these parts.
Mr. Hartman, whoever said I ever picked a fight is a liar.
Well, maybe you didn't actually pick the fights, Jack. But when a man's spoiling for trouble, he doesn't have much luck avoiding it. As I say, people in this neck of the woods know your reputation for fighting. especially with men bigger than yourself. So every big guy you meet is going to have a chip on his shoulder for you, too.
Well, if he has, he's going to get it knocked off. I'm as good a man as any I ever met. I do more work than any of them.
I know about that, too. I guess that's part of your nature, always to prove you're a little better than the other fella. That makes you a valuable cowhand. You wouldn't have any trouble at all holding a job if you just didn't fight so much. Why do you do it, son?
I'll tell you why, Dad. When I was a kid, I was littler than any of the others. Just like now, I'm smaller than most men. And the others was always picking on me, 'cause I couldn't fight back. I made up my mind that someday I wouldn't have to take it anymore. And now I don't, not from anybody.
All right, Jack, just forget I said anything. Except that maybe if you go away, far away, you won't have so much trouble keeping the peace.
I ain't running away, Dad. I'm going to stick right around here till all of them realize they can't get by with anything with me. And if I keep the peace, it'll be because I'm not the one who's scared.
In the months that followed, little Jack Bennett, Jack the Giant Killer, worked for many outfits. A month here, a couple of months there. Once he managed to hold a job for 4 months at the Bar H Ranch before beating a big dumb fellow named Larson nearly to death. So when Jack applied for work at the Lazy X, the foreman was reluctant to hire him. But the Lazy X was short-handed, and roundup time was coming up. And the little man's reputation for hard work finally weighed the scales in his favor. Here, as at all previous outfits, he sensed the silent antagonism of the men. But here it was more pronounced than ever before. When he'd enter the bunkhouse where the boys were laughing and talking, they'd suddenly fall silent. It was evident they'd changed the conversation. Naturally, this resentment on the part of the others had its effect on the little man's temper. And there was one rider at the Lazy X called Hank Withers who irritated Jack more than any of the others. A big, strapping fellow who, for all his size, sat his saddle with easy grace and walked with the tread of a panther. He was young, too, and darkly handsome. Keen intelligence showed in his deep brown eyes. Jack felt an immediate dislike for Hank at first sight. He hated the young man's careless indifference, his sureness of himself. But most of all, he hated the look in Hank's eyes that went right through him as if he weren't there. What Jack didn't know was that Hank was only too aware of the little fighting cock's presence, and that when Hank completely ignored him, it was to sidestep trouble. But the other hands in the outfit could see what was happening. They knew that if Jack Bennett was to ever taste the bitterness of defeat, Hank Withers would have to administer the medicine. All throughout the hot, dusty days of the roundup, they laid plans to set the two men at each other. They dropped casual bits of conversation intended to increase the tension between Jack and Hank, which was rapidly nearing the breaking point as far as Jack was concerned. Bill Neely squatted beside Jack at the campfire one night and started a conversation.
You know, Jack, the boys have had their eyes on you and Hank. We'd heard you was pretty much of a worker, but the way it looks to us, you ain't keeping up with Big Hank.
Oh, yeah? I can rustle more strays in an hour than that big galoot can in a month. You want to see some riding, just you keep your eyes on me tomorrow.
The next day, Jack was a frenzy of action, driving his sorrel mare till her hide foamed with sweat and her nostrils sucked in great gulps of the hot, dusty air. Bill Neely watched his every movement, then went out of his way to report to Hank.
Of course, it ain't none of my business, Hank, but it's common knowledge around the outfit that runt Bennett has bragged he's a better man than you. Now, I don't want to start no trouble between you two, but I just thought you ought to know how he feels.
Well, if Bennett thinks he's a better man than me, it's all right for him to think so.
Well, I'm pretty disappointed in the way you're taking this, Hank. We'd sort of hoped that you'd be the one to take him down a few pegs. Of course, if you're scared of him...
Well, I'm not. Get that straight. If he does something so I have to whoop him, then I reckon I will.
The next day, Bill Neely reported this conversation to Jack, twisting it just enough to make it sound like a threat. Then he returned to Hank with Jack's reply. It didn't take long to get the two of them worked up to a pitch where anything could happen, and shortly it did. On the night the outfit returned to their quarters from the roundup, tired out and with tempers frayed from the grueling days of toil, the incident occurred which set the match to the powder. Bill Neely had left his dog behind, and now upon their reunion, the dog was frisking all over the bunkhouse. It happened to dash across the open doorway just as Jack Bennett stepped in. Jack tripped on the dog, almost went down.
and then in a flash of anger, his foot shot out. Bill stepped up to defend his pup, and the enraged little man lashed out with a vicious right and left, which sent Bill sprawling. Hank got out of his bunk and advanced toward the giant killer.
Listen, Bennett, why don't you pick on somebody you can't lick?
If you mean yourself, come outside and say that again.
Uh-huh. I guess maybe I will. Come on.
Outside in the moonlight, they squared off. The big man waited for the rush he knew would come. The small man waited for the other's guard to drop momentarily, and then flew forward, arms swinging. Around and around they struggled, Jack holding on, fighting in close where his shorter arms could find their mark. Hank pushing the little man away and landing smashing blows. They heaved for breath. Still they fought on, until one great swing by the big man caught Jack flush on the chin. His body straightened up and stiffened, then he fell flat on his back in the dust. A cheer broke from the doors and windows of the bunkhouse where the men had watched the battle. Hank turned toward them.
Well, I done your dirty work for you now. I hope you're satisfied.
He bent and picked up the little man, carried him to the water trough. With his big red checkered handkerchief, he washed away the blood and dust. He carried his victim into the bunkhouse and laid him gently in his bed. Then he turned to the circle of men.
I want all of you to forget this happened. Because if I hear of any of you shooting off his mouth, you'll have to answer to me. Now go on. Get to bed, all of you.
One of the men could not keep silent.
But Hank, he had it coming to him. Somebody had to do it.
Maybe so. But that don't change the facts that he's the gamest little guy that ever lived.
The men lowered their eyes, kind of ashamed. And then one by one, they shuffled off to bed. Hank lay awake in his bunk. His body ached with weariness, and yet sleep wouldn't come. Sometime later, he heard sounds of regaining consciousness coming from the giant killer's bunk. And then shortly after, stifled sobbing. Big, heart-rending sobs of a man who's lost all desire for living. Then the crying ceased, and he could hear the little man collecting his belongings. Soon the door creaked open, and then all was still. Big Hank lay silently another moment, thinking. Then he, too, got up, wrapped his kit in his blanket, and stole out to the corral. Jack was tightening the saddle girth of his sorrel mare and didn't look up when he heard Hank approaching.
Where you going, Jack?
Why don't you leave me alone? Ain't you done enough?
I just thought maybe if I couldn't persuade you to stay, I'd go with you. See, I got my bindle.
Why would you want to go any place with me?
Well, I reckon maybe we got something in common. Leastwise, I know those guys in there are against you, and I'm against them, so that must mean you and me are in the same boat.
Why should you be agin them? They look up to you.
No, they don't look up to me. I'm just a big stiff they can use. That's the way it's been all my life. If I was mean as well as being big, then they would be afraid of me and leave me alone. But as it is, they just use me.
You mean you didn't really want to fight me tonight, that they forced you into it?
The only time I've ever fought is when I was forced into it. By people who are afraid to fight for themselves.
Yeah. I guess you could say I was forced into fighting, too. Although you might not think it from my reputation. I found out that big guys are just as easy to lick as little ones because they're just as afraid of getting hurt. It ain't a man's size that licks him, it's his fear. You didn't lick me tonight. You just knocked me out. It's having to face those guys in the morning with them knowing that I can be whooped. That's what licked me. Now I gotta start all over again, getting back my reputation. Oh, gosh, I've always wished I was big like you so I'd never have to fight.
Huh. That sounds funny, you saying that. I've always wished I was little like you so I would never have to fight.
The two men stood for a moment staring at each other, trying to figure out what they had just said. Finally, the little one reached a decision.
Well, looks like both of us is going to have to keep on scrapping whether we want to or not. But there's no use of us fighting each other. Maybe I will accept your offer to ride along with me.
Okay. But before we start, there's something around here that needs attending to. Yes, sir. There are people around here who wanted fighting tonight. It wasn't me, and it wasn't you.
You mean the people who wanted to see fighting should get to really see a little of it, huh?
The big man grinned and nodded. The little man smiled and grabbed the other's arm. Together, they marched back into the bunkhouse. Shortly thereafter, from the big long shed came cries and groans and crashing. Men fled from both its doors, clad in their underwear and nightshirts, and were swallowed up by the desert night.
You've been listening to another Armchair Adventure.
Social Security provides the serviceman with new insurance protection, with benefits paid to insured men and women at age 65 upon retirement or at age 50 if total and permanent disability strikes. Social Security also represents family survivor benefits for a serviceman's widow and minor children. The full story of how Social Security works is available in a number of different pamphlets. These pamphlets are available now in service libraries and reading rooms. They take only a few minutes to read, and the information you get will help you plan for the future. First of all, you should know what Social Security can mean to your family in the event of your death. And it's important to learn how many years of service you'll need to qualify for the second retirement check. Servicemen can collect Social Security at age 65, but women are eligible at age 62. Have you investigated your Social Security benefits?
Marvin Miller's Armchair Adventures has come to you through the worldwide facilities of the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.
Welcome back. I love these short stories. It's very simple on its face, but there's some great character development and some real understanding between these characters. I like how they gained this real insight into each other, saw what they had in common, and found a new basis for a friendship and a new direction to their life. And because they're tough cowpokes, they conclude this bonding by teaching a good lesson to the men in the bunkhouse. Really good performance by Marvin Miller. Now, in terms of who did these programs for a little while anyway, I was able to find newspaper listings for episodes of Armchair Adventure up until 1954. In addition, there were transcription discs of these episodes that were put out in 1957, and perhaps even beyond that. Regardless, along with Frank Graham and Paul Free's work, I'll keep a lookout for more Armchair Adventures that we can serve up next time we're ready to present you with some one-man theater.
It's time for me to close up the old snack wagon, but don't worry, we'll be back with another serving of old-time radio goodness before you know it. If you want to enjoy some of our longer-form podcasts, you can feast away at my website at greatdetectives.net. Your emails are also welcome at adam@greatdetectives.net. at snackwagon.net.
The Old Time Radio Snack Wagon comes to you from Boise, Idaho. Your host is Adam Graham. Sound production is by Rhines Media, LLC. You can listen to past episodes of the Old Time Radio Snack Wagon as well as connect on social media at our website at snackwagon.net. Email suggestions for episodes to adam@snackwagon.net. This has been the Old Time Radio Snack Wagon.
Until next time, goodbye.